Hey everybody, welcome to the X Podcast. It's so great to be with you and my friends, Tim and Russ. How are you guys doing?
Doing
Wonderful.
well. Doing so good.
I'm good. Life's good.
That seems like really basic and not true. Give me something deeper, something more profound.
Wow.
I created a new stage design that is beautiful.
Liar.
That's right.
You had nothing to do with it.
Thanks to Jay Bowser and team and crew.
Yeah.
Beautiful up
It
here if
is.
you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. X Church. Well, it is.
Here's something profound.
Yes.
I took you to the best coffee place in Columbus. Well,
Fun
you'd been there
fact,
before.
This is that coffee.
Is
They
it?
bought me some
Onyx.
Costa Rica modern sweet box, everything. It was really good, and it's been a nice experience drinking this coffee.
Good.
But barely anything going on in the world right now.
Nothing.
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 It's
Barely
quiet.
anything. Just kind of another
It's really
week.
quiet.
All the Afghanistan conversation with the United States kind of finally pulling out all of its troops and diplomats from the country.
Yeah.
And chaos ensued afterwards. You have images kind of being broadcasted almost overnight. I saw some, I think it was on Sunday night, I saw some rumblings of what was actually happening, images, but it hadn't yet become mainstream. And then on Monday morning, you've got all over every Twitter feed, every news station, images of people, hanging onto airplane wings, almost jumping off when the airplane takes off through hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands, I don't know, of people. You've got images of U.S. diplomats being airlifted off of the top of the embassy, which is reminiscent of a prior situation we've had in our country. And it's just overwhelming, really, to say the least. And in this show, I think what we're so passionate about is having conversations about the bigger picture around current events like this.
Yeah.
And so not to say, this president or this government or, we're not experts in any of that.
Right.
Yeah.
But how can we take the conversation and pull something beneficial from it?
Right.
And so I just wanted to go through today. Let's talk about how you first saw the events unfolding, your initial reaction, maybe the feelings you had, and maybe we can just wrap from there.
Me, I think I'm glad you said what you said about experts. We've prefaced that a few times, but this is another topic that I'm just like, I wish I had a few years to dive into and research and study. And I think it's hard to talk about something, especially when you're not even on the ground. And I think something almost like Israel and Palestine issue is so much more complex than we could ever know. But I think like you, I was struck by at first hearing Sunday night, someone texted me. I was in Grandview and someone said, hey, Homeland Security has put out something for flights. And I got a number of flights coming up in September and October. And I'm like, is this COVID? And then come to realize, wait, the crumbling of the situation in Afghanistan combined with, threats from Al-Qaeda for the first time in 4 years, combined with a shortage of TSA workers due to COVID, security issues because people may be squeaking by. I'm like, okay, wow, something's happening. And then the news reports kept coming in. And then, when I saw the images of thousands in the airport and people hanging off airplanes, to me, so many emotions. It is surreal. It's like something you see out of a movie. It's heartbreaking. It's confusing. It's, I had one of my main, I was in a few different apartments when I lived in Lexington, but one of my main roommates, Dan Espinosa, was in the military and did, in the time we were roommates, did 2 stints in Afghanistan. So he'd be gone for 6 months or a year, come back and come in his room. And we would, the stories he would tell me. And, so it was kind of surreal because yesterday I got on Instagram and I saw that he made a post and it was a picture I remember him sending me of him sitting out looking out over one of the cities in Afghanistan and him talking about the range of emotions. And so to think back that 2 decades, I know that our initial agenda there was not to try to establish a democracy. It was to, it was in response to 9/11, and it was, to rout out Osama bin Laden, to erase as much as we could the threat of terrorism to our homeland. But obviously the secondary goal would be, okay, let's leave a sense of normalcy.
Establish
Let's
democracy.
let's establish and help strengthen and equip. I mean, I think we spent
Billions.
billions
Trillions.
and trillions, and had over 300,000 soldiers there to hopefully leave an Afghanistan army. An Afghan army, or as Dwight Schrute said, Afghanistani, an army that's actually able to defend itself, and so that whatever government they would seek to, whatever future they want to create, they were equipped and ready to do that. And to see 2 decades of that, and all the soldiers' lives that were lost, and the trillions spent, and the time and energy and tours, the longest war in American history, and to see all of that crumble in 24 hours. It just leaves you speechless, not to mention the humanitarian just heartbreak of what could happen. I mean, right now the Taliban supposedly has a new PR image. They're seeking to say they're the new and improved 2.0 Taliban that's been through the Enneagram or whatever they're claiming that, they're going to,
Been through the
but history gives us no reason to believe that.
No.
And I think
Why would you believe that if
Yeah.
you're an Afghan, in living in hiding right now?
No.
So for the girls waiting door to door, to the reports we've already heard of girls being sold pretty much into sex slave, and Christian missionaries saying we're just waiting to die, and we're gonna. The quote from one girl that said we are dying slowly in history, and because we're from Afghanistan, no one's coming.
It's heavy.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much there's so much just on a human level of watching that to process, and then of course the political, decision-making leadership has factored into the forefront.
About you?
What's more to add to that? I felt like that was well said. So
Yeah.
it was.
I think you have a different perspective though, because you
call me old.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I
was
just
going to
felt
say
like it-
because you're a lead pastor, but
Oh,
you called
oh.
yourself old.
And when you're 60,
I don't think
you
lead
have
pastor
a
has
vantage
anything
point
to
of years.
60.
to-
Yeah, but tell me
You
your
know,
perspective.
I think whenever I see things happen, one of the things I've been trying to work on in my own approach to world things, cultural situations, is trying to look at things not with my perspective as a middle-class American in Ohio, but what does it look like for all of the people who've been impacted by this? So I guess what I'm saying is, like, one of the things that I feel like I've tried to grow in is my ability to look at every situation with a level of empathy to say, I wonder what it must be like if I were this person.
Yeah.
And so as I watched this, the scene that it was the most searing was the C5s and people just stacked on them and people all around them and them moving. And what does it say about a situation or a country where thousands of people are all pleading to get out? What they're afraid of and running from. So I immediately, just looking at that, kind of like you said, my heart broke for all the Afghanistans, the people that just their fear of what is coming right back in. And then at the same time, I'm thinking about if you were a serviceman. I know we have plenty of servicemen and women in our church who have served in Afghanistan. And I lived over on a base over in Europe for 3 years. And so when I was growing up, so I was like around the military, and the view is different when you're somebody that has, like you said, either lost friends over there or spent a considerable amount of time in there. And I just wonder how a lot of military feel like either I don't know. I haven't talked to enough of them to know where it falls. Like, man, it's about time that we get out of there.
Yeah.
Or I feel like everything was a waste. Everything that we did, all that time away from my family, all those dangerous situations, and all that feels like it's all for naught now. And I just think, our country, it feels like from the global perspective, our country is being measured by this. In some sense, I think I think it's kind of unfair. It's funny, the rest of the world wants to chime in about America pulling out of there, yet where's the rest of the world actually when we have we've done the majority of the work. And so I think there's an interesting, and maybe this would be something that I've been kind of wrestling with, and I think it's an interesting question that maybe kind of steps out to the larger picture, which is, where do you have this intersection as, let's just say, a global power, as America is considered a global power? Where is there the intersection of responsibility in the global scene? How much responsibility should America have in the global scene to rescue people? And the same question gets asked: how much authority? Like, I think this is always a very interesting, question. Is like, I think one of the things that I appreciate about our country is that we've been willing to go into all kinds of places where incredible atrocities have been taking place, and actually step in and try to rescue people. Yeah. I mean, there's so many continents, so many situations. You can go from South America to Africa to Middle East, to everything. We're trying to step in and help stuff. And then, you get blamed for, why are you over here doing this? And then you go and decide it's not in our best interest to continue to stay. And then the rest of the world is blaming you. Why did you leave? Right. And maybe how we would leave is different. But I always just wonder about that, where you are seen in such a way as a global power. How much responsibility do you have in this situation? So I don't know, just a range of thoughts.
There's a couple striking things for me. There was an interview that I think Brooke Baldwin did from CNN years ago, probably 8 to 10 years ago, of the first ever woman elected to the Afghan parliament or Congress or whatever they were establishing at the time. Yeah. And she had her 2 young daughters, probably around 10 years old. Maybe one was younger, maybe one was older. And she asked the daughters a question like, "What's your dream for your life now? That what's possible with your mom is possible." She said, "Well, I want to be president, the first woman president of Afghanistan." And so, I think you can argue, and I think that's what the political argument will be in the world. The global argument and discussion will be around what's America's responsibility in nation building. Yeah. And I think that's valid. We can have that. And gosh, whatever. I don't.
I got nothing to add.
Right. I mean, I think the devastating part is that you hope that as humans we're evolving, and you hope that we're progressing, and the hope is that we don't have to worry about the things we worried about 20 years ago. That we've just become better people. And the sad reality is that there's still evil that exists in the world today. And it's still as evil as it's ever been. Yeah. And while you personally may be on a journey towards enlightenment and towards being a better person, that does not mean that everybody is that way. Yeah. And you have got forces and people that are trying to. The heartbreaking scenes of if there was a reporter in front of a beauty shop and the owners are painting over images they're just painting over the images of uncovered women on their front thing, on their their display windows out by the road, because they're under the version of Sharia law that's about.
They've already shut down women's schools.
Oh yeah, I mean, and the Taliban says, "Oh, we won't do this. It's going to be slowly over time." Why would you ever believe that? Right. If you're, and the thing about rescuing Afghans that are over there right now, it's not just, not that there's anything against normal Afghan citizens, but it's people who have helped us over the years.
Yes. Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of people who have aided America. And what have we said to them? And this is the part that's just devastating. We've said to them, and I saw a memo that came out from, I don't know if it was the U.S. government or State Department or whatever. It said to all the Afghans who'd helped America, like, if you want rescued, or you make your way to the airport that we've secured, we can ensure the safety of your journey. And that's the memo that they're getting.
Yeah. And then, didn't the Afghan government put out? You talking about from the U.S.?
Yeah.
But then the Afghan government put out a conflicting statement and said, actually, don't do that.
Well, the Afghan government is gone. So so they can.
Maybe it was the UN, but someone put out a conflicting one and said, actually, don't listen to the U.S. because you won't make it.
Oh, wow. Right, well, you know who's guarding every road that leads to the airport?
The Taliban.
Yeah. And so you.
What do you think of the president just up and leaving before
all the leaders,
money and running?
Government
just
before
leaders.
They left, went to Pakistan.
Military leaders.
Yeah. They all just laid down arms and just left.
I don't know. I think that my biggest thing to process is I think we all have a choice personally on how we process these events. And for me, I think it's caused a lot more grief, and it's something to grieve and something to mourn. And the more stories you hear, I mean, we've got pastor friends, right, who are sharing and posting, their Christian pastors in the country of Afghanistan, who, like you said, Russ, are waiting to die.
Yeah.
That they know they're dying, and the Taliban has sent them messages that says, "We know who you are, we know where you live, and we're coming to find you."
Jeez.
And so imagine, just for your faith, in the course of 24 hours, because I don't know what you blame, but here's what I do know: if America were there, that would not happen to those people. So you can argue about responsibility, you can argue about what government should and shouldn't be doing, our role in the global scene, and whose fault it is. But as a human, like you said, Tim, to go, how to say things like, "Wow, we are so privileged to live here."
Yeah.
That regardless of who's president, regardless of who I agree or disagree with, or what I feel about this tax or that tax, or regardless of what a privilege it is to live here.
Yeah.
Another thing is, wow, thank God for all the service people.
Yeah.
Who have
Defended that.
who have, you may have, the perception will be America lost this war.
Sure.
That's what the perception will be globally. But for those of you that serve that country, just like that little girl who was interviewed 10 years ago, you gave people hope who've never had hope before.
Yeah.
So what does that mean
Right.
in order for your presence and your sacrifice to just add a glimmer of hope to somebody who has never had any, to somebody who lived under Taliban rule and then for 20 years had an opportunity to go somewhere else, to dream something different? I mean, what a sacrifice you've made for individuals.
Yeah.
And I think that there's going to be, a reckoning in U.S. leadership on how they've handled all this. Because like we've talked about, just the nature of who I am, I watched CNN right after President Biden's press conference addressing all of this on Monday afternoon, and could not have been more in opposition to what President Biden had just said and done, and trying to hold him accountable for. And so I think that.
What did you think about that? You're talking about it was like 18 minutes of him addressing and basically saying no regrets.
I thought it was personally. I thought it was. He was arguing the wrong. He's talking about the wrong thing. I don't think anybody thinks that we should still be at war in Afghanistan. Maybe some people do. I don't think that's a universally. I think but both people, President Trump, President Biden, when they were campaigning,
Obama,
everybody's talking about getting out.
Wanted to get out of it. Yeah.
But I think it's all about how you got out,
Right.
and the images that'll be burned in history books for the rest of time.
Right.
When I think of 9/11, the first thing I think about is people who thought it was they had a better chance jumping out of a window off of the 100th story of a building than trying to survive.
Right.
And you think about, what if I were put in that situation?
Right.
And so what would be burned in the history books is people who
Those
thought it
images.
was a better idea to hug on to the side of a C5.
Right.
C5?
C5 Galaxy.
Thank you. Who and decided they had a better chance of doing that and jumping off of falling or whatever happened. Those images will be burned in people's mind forever. And that's a statement of America right there.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. And I think that and for him to, my biggest, I didn't like how he didn't really acknowledge the troops, and thank you for everybody who served over there. And that was a poor misstep in my mind.
He mentioned them,
But barely. I mean, you put your life on the line, and what that, families who have sacrificed as a whole to send their loved ones, their mother, their father, their children, or like that go over and serve, and you don't even acknowledge them when the work that they've done is coming into question by the world.
Right.
I don't know. That's my biggest point of contention.
Yeah.
What about you?
On which point?
I don't know. You're the one that asked the question.
What'd I ask?
You asked about the.
What'd you think of
What'd
the
you think about the? Yeah.
politically on that, I have a lot of thoughts. I think I don't envy a seat. He's the fourth president to inherit this. And he said there's some questions I've had that only him and maybe God and a few other people know if it's the truth. He gave some explanations / excuses for why things weren't more prepared at the end. He said the Afghan government didn't want them to have an evacuation plan more prepared because it would tip off their hand, that they felt they weren't in control. He gave some explanations. Again, being in the seat of a leader, you want to extend the reality that things are more complicated than ever. But at the end of the day, I agree with you. I don't know if you said this, but I felt like, and you know what? If he doesn't feel like he made a mistake, he doesn't feel like he made a mistake. But when you have CNN, when even CNN is raking President Biden through the coals, we're talking about, I listened to an interview the other day, Jake Tapper with Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, and just like you're talking about the President Biden, Antony Blinken just kept changing the subject back to, well, we can't be there. To which Jake Tapper, he was ruthless. He was relentless. He was like, no, that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you about the way that you exited. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure there's things that I don't understand. I'm sure in his seat I would have made mistakes. But I do think at this point with the data we have, it is really hard to defend the reality that the Biden administration really messed this up. And you see, and we have evidence that people were warning him, the DOJ and different organizations were warning him, there is going to be a really bad reaction and reprisal from Taliban when this happens. Mm-hmm. And we have him on video multiple times saying, I think that's highly unlikely. The Taliban
he gave 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, 6 weeks ago he said that's highly unlikely.
6 weeks ago when he talked, he basically outlined exactly what happened and said, this won't happen.
Right.
6 weeks ago.
Right.
It gives a lot of time for the Taliban to get organized.
You'll never see the images of a helicopter lifting U.S. diplomats off of an embassy.
Right.
Benghazi.
Yeah.
And it, that's you made your bed there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't think there's. I mean, again, if even CNN is being brutal on President Biden and the administration, I just don't think there's any getting around it. So politically, I think there's a lot of things at the end or at some point we could extrapolate of, okay, what does it look like to take ownership for your decision? Which in a way he said, look, the buck stops with me, but there didn't seem to be any ownership on the way he exited, on the lack of transition plan, on the lack of strategy. There didn't seem to be any ownership on that. Another takeaway is the way you exit something matters. You can build something for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, relationship, business, organization, something in a and no matter how complicated it is, the way you exit matters. And if the people around you are warning something, hey, listen to feedback. Yeah. So, that
to me is, I think, one of the greatest tragedies in the whole thing is that you feel like you invested, as we said, trillions and 20 years and all the personal capital in it, that way it's going to be remembered for is going to be this.
Right.
That's I think a stark reminder, probably for all of us, that I think one bad, maybe, I'm not saying that we should have pulled out of there, but maybe it should have been done in a different way, a different strategy. But isn't it amazing how all it takes is one bad moment, and that can define everything. It can define your career. It can define your marriage. It can define you know what I mean? One bad moment. It's that significant.
Yeah. Sobering.
In a way, I think it, when you talk about how to leave, I think that you have to remember the people that have helped you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest misstep people make is people leave selfishly. Mm-hmm. Like it could be argued with this situation that we left as a political statement to fulfill a campaign promise. Mm-hmm. And how we left was just sorely overlooked. Mm-hmm. And you think about, you have to remember the people that help you along the way. Mm-hmm. You got servicemen who are posting pictures of their translators, who are Afghans, and who, this guy changed my entire perspective on what we were doing on our mission over there. Now, those people who helped the United States are, because of our lack of planning.
Right. They feel abandoned.
are abandoned.
Yes.
And so what does that say about people who've helped the United States? And so I think that is a bigger conversation. Is how you exit something. You have to remember that your success and your growth and it wasn't just you.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, you're not just so great and so powerful that you've evolved into this better human because of solely your internal experience.
Right.
No, there's people that gave you breaks. There's people that gave you opportunities. There's people that trusted you. There's people that helped you along the way and that had faith in you.
Yeah.
That you have to remember, or else forsake a reputation and never have those relationships ever again. So I think that's a great point on how to leave. And I think it'd be wise to talk about leadership too.
Yeah. Can I make a sidebar,
Absolutely.
not devil's advocate? Can I make a sidebar? One little pet peeve though from the last few days, since we do talk about sometimes political partisanship and echo chambers, is one kind of annoying thing though has been, I'm looking at this saying, man, the Biden administration blew it. They need to own it. They screwed this up. But I get on social media and I see some of my friends that are far right wing that never had one moment of critique in the 4 years of President Trump that are posting pictures of the airplane saying this never happened under Trump. This is horrible leadership. And I'm thinking, okay, you're right. But if you're so partisan and so entrapped in an echo chamber that you can't critique one thing, any of the scandals or any of the missteps of a previous administration, but when it happens on the other side, because you could go to any presidency and take screenshots and say this wouldn't have happened under the previous administration. And for me, just a little soapbox moment. It's annoying to see.
I think that our conversation has always been, when it comes to politics, let events transform you.
Right.
Yeah.
First.
Right.
As a human.
Right.
Right? Let it grow your compassion. Let it evolve your perspective. Grow empathy inside of you.
Right.
See more points of view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't just react right away. That's what our conversation has always been through 2020, through the election, through George Floyd, through everything, through January 6th. Let it evolve you. Let it do its work inside of you.
Right.
And then whatever your perspective is on the other side, that's fine. But don't just live in your box, live in your bubble, and only listen to your people.
Yep.
I think to that
and
point,
don't use human tragedy as a political statement.
Yes.
That bothers me more than anything. Like you said, there's probably a level of the exit was probably as much of a political strategy, response to campaign to whatever. I'm going to be the one to do it. I get all that. And then the other side, when you take it immediately, you see that situation. The first thing that you post is, well, see, this former presidency would have never done this. This was because, it's like, that to me is, I think, just along the lines of we are missing something if we don't first look with a human perspective, look at ourselves, look at how to grow. I think the same thing speaks to leadership. It's very easy for everybody in our world to critique the leaders who have to make really hard decisions when you're not in the seat.
Right.
Not saying he did it right. I'm just saying it's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
And I think that people can. It's very clear when you take full responsibility for your actions.
Yeah.
And when you say that you take responsibility for your actions and you don't mean it.
Yeah.
And I think that's clear when he said the buck stops with me. That was clearly half-baked. I mean, that was not.
Yeah.
If you listen to his speech at all,
Right.
he was not taking responsibility.
Right.
He was placing heavy blame. Because if you say, well, I just trusted the Afghan president's word on this and that. Well, that's great, but you shouldn't have. Turns out you were bamboozled.
Yeah.
And so I think politically, one thing that I watched live, there's a reporter CNN has on the ground who now is wearing Ashley Ward, maybe, I don't know. She's wearing a big, covering, and now that the Taliban's in charge, so she's, but she's like right in front of the Taliban reporting. And all sorts, like she's in
Bug guts.
And so she was reporting live and talking about how quickly all this has happened. It's like Monday morning, how quickly all this has happened, and all the things that are changing so rapidly. And then she's talking about the Afghan response that people are having towards the Taliban. And so she's trying to articulate how devastating it is for most, but how also there's this weird mystique that some people, because they've never seen the Taliban, in person before.
Yeah.
The new generation. And
Yeah.
so there's some level of mystique that they have with the people.
Wow.
And she's trying to describe the energy in the air, and she says people are devastated, but also the Taliban are being oddly friendly towards people. There's not shooting, there's not. And so now all the right-wing media outlets have taken that statement. The Taliban are this, but they've been being friendly.
I saw that.
And so they're plastered. Oh, can you believe they always find a way to spin it? They always find a way to spin it. And that's just, I watched that live, and that was not what she was trying to say.
Yeah,
And
it's such spin. On a funny note, I will say, Babylon Bee, they're they're a Christian satire, but they're pretty far right wing. They put something that was stupid, but was it was a picture of the Taliban with their face gear, and they said CNN praises the Taliban for having responsible face masks, at least during the war, and I was like, it's just so
horrible.
Stupid,
Just
oh
horrible.
My God,
But
so stupid.
The problem is how that little nugget of truth that right now.
Because people will share that and think it's real news too. And I saw what you're talking about. And it's, I mean, what you said is like,
you share Babylon Bee and think it's real news.
if you're a person of faith, I'm just going to say something really cliche.
the baptism water slide.
If you are, Stephen Furtick.
Yeah, that was great.
Yes. But if you're a person of faith, I'm just going to say something really cliche, but I think it's true. Like when we see this human tragedy and we see girls getting ready to be sold into sex slavery, if you are posting more than you're praying, there's probably an issue.
Right.
And there's probably more of a political frustration than a spiritual, emotional, human burden. This morning, I'm walking around my apartment, and I was trying to do like a little bit of a prayer walk. I got to be honest, I'm behind. If you're watching this, even if you don't go to church, you need to text, if you see this in the next little bit, Unstoppable 94000, because we're in the middle of like 21 days of just asking God to just touch our community in a really special way. And so you've put out these daily, just kind of, it's really cool, just daily ways to encourage and pray for people around us, whether it's servicemen and women or waiters and waitresses, teachers, hospital workers. And I got to be honest, I was behind. Today's, I was behind, so I'll call up on 3. I'm a little, well, and when I finally, I'd said a couple of prayers, but I finally got a moment to actually, like, pray for what's going on. And it's amazing how when you stop to even do that, like it rearranges how your emotions, it rearranges your priorities, even in your spirit, your soul, if you can say it that way. And I just think it's so important, like the way we respond, that it comes from the right center of us, and that it comes from the right perspective of us. It comes from a place that is not bathed in emotion, but maybe more bathed in prayer and reflection. Yeah. And maybe more bathed in human empathy of trying to put yourself in the shoes of that person.
Yeah, totally agree. In fact, I would just point out that the little video clip we had for today, in today's prayer, and the halfway point of our 21 days of prayer and fasting on this, was to pray for your enemies.
Yeah.
And it's challenging when you do that, literally, and because that's what God's word calls us to do. And what's unfortunate is even today, and I want to say in the Christian subculture, is that I've seen over this past year not a lot of praying for enemies, but publicly posting to destroy enemies. Yeah. And how volatile and how polarized that we become. And I'm just thinking, if you're a follower of Jesus, and again, I know not everybody that listens or watches this is, but I'll speak for myself, and for those who do say I'm a follower of Jesus, you shouldn't find a follower of Jesus sitting on any type of extreme, hurling stones and abuse and names and things at people across the way, because that's not Jesus's way. His way was pray for your enemies, bless those who curse you, pray for those who persecute you. And that is the way of a Jesus follower. Right. And so I think, if anything, what we hope to get out of a conversation like this, because we don't have any experts, it's just how do we feel when we see it? How does it make us feel? How do we process this? For me, I think whenever you see these kind of moments, hopefully what you take away from this is that rather than I see something on the news, so what's my political slant? What's my perspective? What's my party's perspective? What's all my friends saying about this? Yeah, I'm mad at this too. Yeah, this is our modern day Vietnam. Instead of doing that, I guess what it would look like to, like you said, respond from a place as a Jesus follower and go, okay, what would Jesus do in this moment? Well, I don't know. He called me to pray for my enemies.
Yeah.
You know, he calls me to pray for those and to bless those who curse me. And so that's going to be my first response in these moments, and to see things from a human perspective, and the fact that God loves every person, and God loves the Taliban that are coming in that just as much as the Americans when they draw out.
They're a modern day Saul right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And who knows if God can make one of them a Paul.
And so it's just like, just to have that. I just think, again, it goes back, we've said this word, but this is just something I feel like that God has been kind of really working in me for probably the last year. And I'm starting to see it come to light a lot more, which is, how do I view things with empathy? And I'm not naturally a feeler. Like, I'm a thinker. I don't feel deeply emotionally. Like, I'm not an overly, but I think I'm having to learn and process the way I am, that I need to think empathy first. And the way I'm learning to do that, this is the thing that's really challenged me politically and other things. And these are the things I'm starting to see that I really don't like about both sides, especially when you get to extremes, is that when I have a political point of view or agenda that is all about me first, that it comes from a self-centered place, what's going to make my life better, what is going to make things easier for me, that I am not thinking the way Jesus thinks, who said to, what are the most important things that you can do if you're a Jesus follower? Jesus was asked that question. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And second, love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
Again, that's love your neighbor. It doesn't mean you're not supposed to love yourself, but that is my perspective, is I'm going to love God and I'm going to love you guys. Yeah. And that should be my first response to everything, not, well, eventually after all this, then maybe I guess if it's good for them. And so that's just really challenging me politically and just the way I see things.
I think it's a great, there's never been more of a need for people in their spirituality to be centered around Jesus and not around self-love.
Yeah.
Because here's a crisis where if your spirituality is strictly like, love myself better, let me focus on my emotions more and feeling more in tune with who I am. I don't know if that's necessarily a horrible sentiment, but what you will experience in crises like this is you don't have any hope.
Yeah.
And it will fall short. Crises like these are when my faith in Jesus is illuminated. Because here is what Christians, Afghan Christians who are waiting to die, have.
Yeah.
Hope.
Right.
The presence of Jesus.
Yeah.
An eternal inheritance.
Yeah.
And they know that their life is not for nothing, because it will end in this way.
Right.
Yeah.
That they have a place, that God's preparing for them rooms in heaven, right? And that He is going to honor the sacrifice that they make as they acknowledge Him as their final, their final acts on the earth.
Yeah.
And so, as a Christian, that is the greatest challenge for me.
Yeah.
To go, wow, there are people right now who believe what I believe, and how, if I was hiding in my family home, and in a matter of 24 hours, everything changed, and I've got my kids under my wings, and we're hungry because we can't walk down the street to the store. We are waiting for somebody to execute us.
Yeah.
Think about your spirituality right now, and think about what you put your faith in. Is it energy? Is it the universe? Is it your zodiac sign? Right? Or is it your Enneagram?
Right.
Because in
Is it
that
yourself?
moment,
Right.
guess what? It loses.
Yeah.
But the purpose of Jesus in all this, and to the more and more I see crises like these, and the more you're able to put yourself in those situations, I hope for myself and for everybody who would ever come across this podcast, that you would go, there's only one true light in the world.
Yeah.
And there is evil in the world.
Yep.
And there's only one thing that can overcome the evil,
Right.
and it's the name, it's the
Yeah.
purpose, it's the presence of Jesus Himself. And that will that's my prayer. And I think that's
Yeah.
our prayers,
Yeah.
that would come to the forefront.
Yeah.
And that's
Agreed.
the prayer of the Christians and the pastors and the people who are innocent,
Yeah.
who have done nothing wrong,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
will be executed.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
turn your prayers toward them instead of, like you said, instead of worrying about posting and all that. Pray for the Afghan people right now. That
And
are
ask God
just
to
in a
bring
crisis.
revival to that land.
Yeah.
Ask God to heal, to protect, to heal, but also to do what. Maybe it's a divine optimism in me, but the other thing I'm listening, and I understand what President Biden was saying is like if they were going to take advantage now, the military leaders, what we give them, they would have done it. At this point, there's no hope, and I understand the point he's making. At the same time, I'm like, no, there's always hope. This may sound like I don't think there's anything we could add that's more important than what you just said. But one weird, like maybe arbitrary, like takeaway that I thought about is, and this isn't to broad brush all the military leaders and political leaders in Afghanistan, because I'm sure there's great ones. But a common thing that we do keep hearing from servicemen and women and leaders over there is there seems to be a little bit of an apathy in a lot of the Afghan leaders that they're trying to equip.
Yeah.
And whether that's true or not, let's pretend it's true for a moment. It just made me think, like, last fall there was a leader that fell, and we kind of processed in one of the podcasts and just had this kind of moral failure and this tragic ending. But in his post, he said something I thought was really interesting. He said, "I didn't take advantage of the help that I always knew was readily available to me." And I started thinking about the concept of, like, even in churches, you can be the most incredible church, or you can be in the most incredible family, or, again, this may sound like an odd thing to think about, but let's say you're an Afghanistan leader who's been gifted and equipped with air power, military training from, arguably the greatest military power in the world. You can be in a situation and have all the tools, the right environment, which we always talk about. It's important. Surround yourself with the right people, right environment. But I think there's also a takeaway. You can be surrounded by all the right tools, all the right people, all the right environment. But at the end of the day, there is an autonomy God has given each of us to bring our own passion, desire, and ownership to actually create a new landscape and carve a new future. That at the end of the day, no matter how, Judas was taught by Jesus.
Right.
Judas walked with Jesus 3 years, was equipped by Jesus, was around the disciples. But at the end of the day, like it's a sobering reality, and I think takeaway of what ownership am I taking with the tools available, the people available, the support available, the education available, what I do know, what I have been taught, the opportunities I do have to actually create a new future.
Any last words?
No. Good.
Yeah. So be praying for all the things, and it's a great time, like you said, Russ, to join us in our fasting and our praying as we just we process all this and in some way, somehow hope for God to be glorified through all of it, and through praying that evil won't advance, right? That good will prevail, and that people's lives will be changed because of this. In heavy days, but not purposeless days.
Right.
And heavy days, but days where we can be filled with hope because we know that God's in it. So if you're listening, thank you. And we just would ask again that if you know somebody who's struggling or working through, maybe a service member, maybe somebody who knows people, Afghan people, maybe somebody who has been in contact with them, just share this with them. We hope it gives them hope, and we hope it gives you hope. Thanks to everyone who's liked, shared, subscribed, reviewed this podcast. We love you all, our X Podcast family. So we'll see you next time.